Hi everyone, happy Wednesday. Now, Celtic's club finances are not something that we often chat about on this channel at all, but we're going to do just that today because there was quite an interesting Twitter thread that came out, I think, earlier this week, maybe Monday or Tuesday, from Swiss Ramble, who are quite a well-known Twitter account specialising in the business and finances of football. They basically did a deep dive into Celtic's financial results for season 2020-2021, and I'm basically going to copy all of their homework on this video, bring you some of the interesting biggest points from what was a very lengthy thread. So yes everyone, finances are the order of the day. Let's get into it. There's so much to unpack. It was a very lengthy Twitter thread. It's pretty fascinating if you're a bit of a nerd like me, and I will, for any other nerds out there, link the link. I will put the link below for any other nerds out there who want to take a look at the figures in full. Now, this video is going to be a little bit different from what we usually do. It's going to be a bit like a uni lecture with lots of graphs coming up, basically like a presentation. So yeah, no talking at the back. Let's get into it. We're going to start with general figures, which you're seeing there. Basically, in short, season 2020-2021 was a really difficult season for Celtic, both on, of course, and off the park as well. However, there were some positives. Now, in Celtic's 2019-2020 results, the club made a profit of just £0.1 million before tax. By June of this year, that had swung to a loss of £11.5 million. Now, revenue, which is the money coming into the club, fell from £70.2 million to £60.8 million. Player sales also fell. Remember, we were trying to hold on to all our best players to try and win 10 in a row. That went well. They fell from 24.2 million to 9.4. Now, we did sell Jeremy Frimpong for, I think, at least 10, 11 million pounds. So you may be wondering why the figure is only 9.4. The short answer is I'm not 100% certain, but I'm assuming it's because football transfer fees aren't paid in one go. They're paid in instalments. So I'm assuming that's why that's the case. Ticketing fell from 30.8 million to 21.7 million. No prizes for guessing why. Empty stadia due to COVID. And that just shows how important fans still buying season tickets was. Celtic's £50 merchandise vouchers that they did for season ticket holders last season was said to have cost the club £2.8 million. It wasn't all bad though. Things like stadium operation costs were down by more than £3 million. Obviously, if you've not got people in the stadium, you don't need to sort things. You don't need people working on the pie stands if no one's going to buy pies, for example. I always go down the food route with my analogies. But anyway, commercial revenue rose by £7.9 million from 20.8 to 28.7. So a big jump for commercial. We'll cover that in depth at the end of the video. The club also received a £5 million insurance payout for matches being played behind closed doors. And again, we'll cover that at the end of the video. Now, Celtic balanced this overall loss in revenue by bringing down other costs. That's how it works in any walk of life. If, say, your wage is down 1 month, you maybe don't go out on a Saturday night. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Most notably, Celtic did this through player wages, which went down from 56.2 million to 51.7. So a fair jump of about 4 or 5 million there. That's the full club, by the way, not just the players. I was thinking, yeah, £1 million a week roughly seems quite a lot. But when you consider some of the wages that our board members are on, it makes a bit of sense. Some of that was down to help from the government's job retention scheme, lower bonuses last season. You don't tend to get bonuses when you're getting cuffed off St Mirren and Ross County. That's how Celtic's wage bill has fallen over the last few years right there. The club's other expenses, that's a quote, other expenses, that's what they call it, they were down marginally from £21.9 million to £20.1 million. That included the £600,000 that it cost to Neil Lennon. Yes, you're hearing that right. Neil Lennon really took over £500,000 from Celtic after the car crash that was last season. But I'm not going to pass any comment on that at all. The post-tax loss Celtic announced isn't great, but it is only around half of Rangers' £24.2 million loss as shown in this graph. Now, there will be a little bit of chatting about Rangers because the way Swiss Ramble have done it is a comparison a lot of times between Celtic and Rangers and the rest of Scottish football. But if we're totally honest, there's only really one other club in Scotland that you can kind of compare Celtic to, and it makes some sort of sense in terms of the clubs are relatively similar sized. The other figures there are for smaller Scottish Premiership sides. They are from the season before, so they're not nearly as impacted by COVID, and you can see they're miles smaller as well. Now, this is how Celtic compared to selected other European clubs. As you can see, we actually haven't fared too horrendously in that table. God knows what they're doing in Porto, by the way, to be bringing in £29 million worth of profit during COVID. They must have sold a couple of big hitters last summer. Celtic's loss in season 2020-2021 was the first since way back in 2014-2015, as shown by this graph. It ended a run of 5 consecutive years of profit, although 2 of those years, as you can see, the profit was very, very marginal. Now, you can see there how important the Champions League is in bringing in positive figures for Celtic. Goes without saying, but it would be amazing, so big if we managed to get back in there next season by winning the league. Moving on to money brought in from player sales, that's obviously one of Celtic's biggest income generators every single year. This is how Celtic's player sales figures compare to some other leading Scottish clubs. We're still miles ahead of anything else in Scotland, despite that number falling massively last year. This is how much money Celtic have made from sales in recent years. This includes sell-on fees for future moves made by players. The obvious one that springs to mind is Virgil van Dijk moving from Southampton to Liverpool for, was it close to 100 million? I think Celtic got about 6 or 7 million out of that. These are the players that have moved on over the last 12 years. Virgil van Dijk in there, of course. The ones in green went through too late to be included in this year's figures, so they'll be in 2022's numbers. As you can see, there are some big ones in there, meaning that we'll almost certainly be back in profit next year when the likes of Edouard, Ayer and Christie go through. Now, in the last 9 years, Celtic have generated £112 million from player sales, and that is not including the big ones that went through in the summer there. In the same time, Rangers have brought in just £8 million. So there's a huge gulf there. Overall, we are still the big dogs in terms of finances in Scottish football, but of course on the European scene it's a very different story. It's fair to say that we're still miles off Europe's biggest 30 clubs in revenue. You can see them there. Our £70 million revenue from 2019-2020, so last year, is just over half of the 30th place side there, AC Milan. The top 30 there pretty dominated by English sides. I think I count 13 there. And even the fact that a huge club like AC Milan are only 30th in the list really does say it all. Back in 2004, Celtic were as high as 13th in those rankings. So it just shows how rich the major leagues in Europe have become, and obviously how rich the teams in those leagues have become, most notably the English Premier League. Getting to the Champions League regularly would obviously help Celtic bridge that gap from where we are to the real top earners in terms of revenue in European football. This graph shows just how valuable the Champions League money is to Celtic in comparison to the Europa League. Green there for the Champions League, red for the Europa League. Just take a look at the 2 seasons Brendan Rodgers got us into the Champions League, and that tells you everything you need to know. The Champions League money is only going up as well. For example, we made more money for finishing bottom of our group in the Invincible season than we did for making the last 16 under Neil Lennon in 2012-2013 when we beat Barca and all of that. The Champions League, I think, has got a new cycle starting in 2024 as well. So, if we can really get our coefficient in a good place, both Celtic's club one and Scotland's one, to a state where the Scottish League winner is going to get automatic Champions League football, it will be even bigger for Celtic, because that pot is only increasing, as I say, with the new format that's coming in 2024. More games as well for Celtic to make ticket money. Basically, in the short term, winning the league this year is huge. Even if we get to the Champions League group stage next season and get scudded again off of the Barcelonas and PSGs of this world, although Barca's probably a bad example at the moment, it doesn't really matter, because the Champions League money is such a game changer. It's nothing new, nothing you probably didn't already know, but those graphs do just show how important it is. Moving on now, Celtic's commercial revenue went up from 20.8 million to 28.7 million, the biggest in Scotland by miles. That's the last 4 years there. Retail made up £15 million of that, sponsorship over 12 million. That Adidas deal, of course, a huge part of why that retail money was so big. The huge Dafabet contract as well, helping with sponsorship, especially during COVID when people had more spending money and weren't spending it on things like nights out. They were spending it on things like clothes. I mean, I can only talk for myself, but I spent so much money on Amazon and ASOS and places like that last year, whereas this year that's gone down a lot. I also, as you know very well, I bought loads and loads of Celtic gear, so I've helped contribute to that huge £15 million retail fee that Celtic have announced in their figures. As previously mentioned at the start of the video, Celtic received £5 million worth of compensation for matches being played behind closed doors during the pandemic. Now, that wasn't a thing all Scottish clubs got. This was a thing that some Scottish clubs got. Celtic got more money than anyone else. I think it's fair to say whatever staff member came up with that genius idea, they've earned themselves a little bit of a pay rise, I would say. This really long thread finishes with a summary. It says that Celtic are in pretty good financial health despite the pandemic due to the sustainable model in place at the club. In my own summary, it does seem like Celtic are in decent shape financially. Perhaps that's part of the reason why we were able to spend so much money this summer assembling a squad that Ange has worked wonders with so far. Of course, the support are the people who deserve the credit and most of the credit for this. The backing in terms of season ticket numbers, both last season when they didn't even get to see a single match at Celtic Park, and this season after the shambles of last season, both on and off the park. I think the support deserve a huge round of applause, and they are one of the main reasons, the main reason why Celtic are in quite a good financial state. We already have a lot of sellable assets in this squad that Ange is building, but we're in no dire need to cash in on these players, unlike some other clubs in Scotland. So in general, Celtic have a good kind of foundation to build from at this stage, and Ange is certainly doing that at the moment. Of course, financial figures are all nice, and it's good to see positive numbers and pluses rather than minuses, but it's about what happens on the park more than anything else, and thankfully Ange seems like he's going the right way with this Celtic team. That's it, everyone. You may have to watch this video 2 or 3 times to properly get what I'm saying. So many figures, it's taken a couple hours to actually prepare for this video. I hope you've managed to stay awake during the last 15 minutes or so. I really do appreciate you watching this. We'll be back tomorrow with Scott McDonald and David, and you'll be delighted to know that football on the park will be back on the agenda.